reports. Go ahead.
All right, it is still August 28, 2024. My name is Tony Venhuizen. We are doing an oral history interview today for the South Dakota State Historical Society. Start with an easy one. Can you tell us your name and spell it?
Okay, Tom Geraets, Geraets.
Very good, and we have permission to record this interview.
Absolutely.
Let's start with, tell us about your personal background, your family history, where you grew up, kind of your early life.
Okay.
And are you from Del Rapids?
Grew up in, yes, near Del Rapids. My mother and was it Schwabach? That's
Okay.
the other half of the town.
Oh, I know.
And Geraets and as the other. And but we had a farm in by Rutland initially, and then by Lone Tree.
Oh,
And then we lost that farm and moved to Sioux Falls. I would comment that while we were on that farm, you know, I tell my grandkids that, you know, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have indoor plumbing or heating, or there was no phone, and it was just, they say they just can't believe that. You know, and when you look back, it hasn't been that long ago, I guess.
where
Maybe
was that?
in north of Lone Tree there.
Where's Lone Tree?
On Old Highway 77, about halfway in between Coleman and Egan.
Okay.
Okay, there was a Lone Tree there. And at Gale Ridge Schools where we went, and then we moved to Sioux Falls. And when I was in the third grade, moved into a house that had electricity and actual plumbing. And then we moved back to the Coleman area, and my mother had a restaurant there, Seals Cafe it was called. And I remember telling her that God forbid anything ever happened to you, I would never forgive you if you left this place to me. Okay. We lived, there were 5 of us lived in a trailer that was 8 by 40, okay? And I remember when I was graduated from the 8th grade, she said, you can stay at home, but you're on your own. You know, the old tough German that she was. And when I had various jobs, and then when I was in high school, I started the garbage service there, and had that through a few years of high school. And then I worked construction, went to college, and every year, and that was at a time when you could work and make enough in the summertime to pay for an entire year of college. Okay, went to Northern. That's where I met my wife. Had a teaching degree. And the reason I went into teaching is because I didn't want to go to Vietnam. Okay, and then, but my senior year of college, Nixon did away with teaching deferments, and we had the lottery. So I did go to the Guard. I had 6 years in the Guard, and was in Rapid City at the flood, during that time. But anyway.
What year did you graduate high school?
66.
66, okay.
Okay. And then graduated from Northern in 70. Went to Huron, taught for 3 years. And then
what was it like being at the Rapid City flag?
It was surreal. Because we had been married a week, and my wife was in another wedding, and I had guard duty, and I called her and I said, I've just been we were living in Aberdeen at the time, she was going to summer school, and I said, I've just been activated, I don't know where we're going, but I have to be in Huron in an hour. They said, bring all your stuff, we're going to be activated. So we convoyed to Rapid City, and I remember at Wall, there was no traffic on the interstate, just emergency vehicles, you know. We obviously, when we were in Huron, before we left, we knew where we were going. So, but when we got to Rapid, it was just devastation that you can't believe. You know, I was a medic at the time, and each medic was assigned to a platoon or a company, depending upon the day. And so we were on just searching for bodies the first few days. And then and unfortunately, we found a few, and those faces will always stick with you. But then we gave shots, typhoid and tetanus. Just seemed like the line never ended because everybody had to have a shot. Anyway, then I had an opportunity to go to Pierre. And so my wife Lynn and I, we were married just a short time. We said, let's go for 2 years. And 49 years later, we left in August of, we moved down here in August of 22. So
What did you, when you moved to Pierre, what were you going there to do?
I was a planner and grant writer. Okay, that might sound kind of technical, but anybody who could put pen to paper could get a grant.
Who were you working for?
For it was called the Commission of Drugs and Substances Control at the time. Ironically, the guy that taught across the hall from me was Roger Merriman, and he was campaign manager for Kermit Sandy. Okay, Kermit Sandy was running for Attorney General and was elected. And Roger said that we need somebody to write grants. Do you want a job? I said sure. So that's how we moved to Pierre. Of course, you know the relationship with Kermit Sandy and Bill Janklow that's a whole nother story. But
So you were there working for Attorney General Sandy.
Correct. And
Janklow was a deputy and then wound up running against him and beating him.
Let's see, I had a train of thought there. Oh, I was only in the Commission of Drugs and Substances Control for a short time. Okay, then I moved to the Health Department, and I was a grant writer there. And then in emergency medical services. And then a friend of mine was the state auditor, and he needed a deputy state auditor, Vern Larson. So I said, sure. So I was deputy state auditor for a time, and that's kind of when then a position came open. It's called the Director of Central Services in the Bureau of Administration. Okay, and I applied for that and got the job, and then that's how I've kind of met Janklow.
So when was that?
87-ish. He was kind of, I think it was in his second term.
Okay, of the first two.
Of the first two, correct.
Your directors, Central Services.
Mm-hmm.
And what did that involve? Someone told me you were pretty involved with the Christmas tree display.
Oh yes. Gee, I hated that project.
Huge undertaking.
Well, do you want to talk about the trees now first?
Yeah, well,
okay.
Why not?
It started, Dottie Howe, bless her heart, okay? We got committees together, and when they started putting up a couple of trees, and then, of course, this is the type of stuff that Bill Janklow loved, you know, but I was being in the Bureau of Administration, because it was our job to make sure everybody in state government had everything they needed to do their job, okay? And so, obviously, we got kind of pulled into it. But the trees, the thing that bothered me, and still does, is they're such a fire hazard. And I remember when I was Commissioner of Administration, because by law, the Commissioner of Administration is responsible for the Capitol building. So, and I could just see me under the lights, you know. You knew this was a fire hazard, okay?
They're all real trees too.
Yeah. And we had inmates walking the halls at nights. We had fire detectors. We had fire extinguishers. We sprayed them with fire retardant. But even then, I remember one time we took a couple. We took them out to the landfill in Pierre, and I lit one, and poof, just. And because my fear was and is that you get somebody that could start a tree on fire, and then it would just chain react all the way through. And just think if a family, if I had a little person in that building, you know, and they were down the hall, you wouldn't run out. You would go get your. I mean, I remember when I left in 2002. That's why I left in September. It was before the Christmas trees, because I didn't want to be responsible for them for another year. But I put an action report to Governor Rounds saying at least do, you know, every other as a artificial tree or something like that. But it was on deaf ears. But that's the Christmas tree story. Yeah.
Hey Tom, can I have you just?
Oh, sure.
'Cause I'm hearing
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry.
So,
You bet.
thank you.
Mhm.
So what were some of the, let's talk a little bit about what was it like working with Governor Janklow? How did you get to know him? What was he like?
He was a great guy to me, and he was great to me. But you had you couldn't BS, you know. And if you didn't know, you better say you don't know. And because I saw people try to, you know, he just appreciated frankness and being straightforward. You know, I told him once I'll do anything for you but time. Okay. So but he was soft-hearted, and he had an idea a minute. You know. Oh, another story. One time he says, "Geraets, get up here." So my office was down first floor in the administration
Oh, yeah,
building where security is now.
right.
That was after 9/11, then we moved out. Anyway, he says, "Geraets, get up here." And so I said, what can I do for you? And he says, come with me. So we walked out his side door, which led to the front steps, and it was just pigeon droppings all over the front steps. And he says, "See this? It's just, this is terrible." I said, "Well, we clean it up, you know, as good as we can." And I said, he says, "No, I got an idea." And I said, "Okay." So we went back into his office, and if you remember the Capitol with the pillars, and then on top they're flat, okay? He had designed these metal pieces that were kind of shaped like this, you know, to sit up there, so that the pigeons couldn't sit on top of those columns. I said, "Oh, Governor, that's a heck of an idea." And he says, I said, we'll take care of it. We have guys that can manufacture those and get them up. And I waited till he was back one day, and we had a cherry picker, and we hoisted a guy up there, and he affixed those to the top of the columns. And that night, okay, I went up, or I had a couple guys that I could trust. We went up with some small pellet guns, and we shot all the pigeons that are in the dome, and took them away. That's probably illegal, but and the next morning he calls, and he's, "Geraets, get up here." He's, "There's not a pigeon around." I says, "Governor, it was a hell of an idea." And so I regret not, because after he got out and moved down here, I was going to tell him what we did that one night, but that's.
So those spikes still on there?
I don't know. They're not spikes. It was
Or
kind of it's just a little metal piece. I don't know if they're still up there
Can
or
you
not.
see them from the?
No,
Oh,
no.
I know that for a while there were fake owls hanging up there.
Yeah. Oh, that we tried everything.
I don't know
yeah.
if maybe those are still there.
Yeah, but that was But that was the kind of things, that he liked. Another time, he loved the stories where there's a humanitarian side. We had a trooper, highway patrol trooper come in, and I need to take a step back. One of the jobs of the Commissioner of Administration is surplus property. Because somebody has to dispose of or authorize the disposal of state property. So that's the Commissioner of Administration. And a trooper came in and said he wanted to keep his dog, a drug dog that he had. And he says, "Is there any way?" And I said, "Oh," I says, "You got $1?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, sign this form." And then I said, "I hereby declare Sparky, or whatever his name was, surplus," because the dog had hip dysplasia and they were going to have to put it down. And he wanted to keep the dog. But Janklow loved stories like that. And somebody said, "Aren't you afraid that, somebody's going to accuse you of, arbitrarily getting rid of state property?" And I said, Bill Janklow would love stories, would love this to get into the paper. but it was those types of things that he was in. We did stuff like, consolidated the fleet. One day we were at a cabinet meeting and somebody said, "Well, how many cars does the state have?" Well, the person that had we were insuring said, "Well, I think there's like 6,000. I think we're insuring for like 6,000 vehicles." And he says, "Geraets, let's consolidate these." And so we consolidated all the vehicles in state government under the Bureau of Administration. And what was really interesting was that we found that some agencies had park avenues. A park avenue, yes, and with that, and not state plates, and no state markings, and because every employee always felt that they were unique. That I need this because
Want to take their car home, probably.
a lot of them did.
Yeah.
We had, as a side deal, I remember with at State and Brookings, we had they were really not wanting to give up their cars, and because they used to pick up the professors at their houses. When Professor Smith needed a car, they would go deliver it to his house, wait there, and then so that he could, and we said, no, I'm not going to do that. And yes, these are the cars we have, Impalas, or Malibus, and we charged by the just like your car rental. Because I didn't do this on my own. We hired a guy that had run fleets, and so. But anyway, back to Brookings. I remember Wes Cheddar. He was not happy camper about this deal, and he said, "Well, we're gonna charge you for that space that you have these cars in now, since they're your cars." I said, "That's fine, Wes." I said, "You can charge." I said, but we're gonna move them out to the DOT shop, like they are in Pierre. Everybody in Pierre does it." And oh man, he was just furious with me. Still is to this day, I think. But they stayed where they are. And I said, "And you're not going to charge us for it." But anyway, but the state fleet consolidation, we ended up, once we found out all the cars, there was only like 3,200 cars in the fleet. But, and people didn't get their own parking spots anymore, okay? And the cars had, we didn't go with a big travel commission on the side. We just went with the decal on the window and the plates, so that when we sell them, we don't have a damaged vehicle. So, but it was stuff like that. And I remember another time, this train of thought you were talking about, we had another project in the Bureau of Administration was federal surplus property. And I called upstairs one time. I says, Governor, I need to go to Hawaii. He says, everybody does. Because only a cabinet head could, and the governor could authorize travel to Hawaii, because who needs to go to Hawaii? But one of the programs that we had was federal surplus property, and it was headed up by Daryl Hayter. And he found out that we could get federal surplus if we had inspectors in these major depots, and Pearl Harbor was one of them. But they needed somebody who could authorize the contract, because they would screen this equipment. It was everything from bulldozers to diesel engines to toilet seats, all federal surplus. But we would put it in a container, and then that container needed to be shipped from Pearl back to Huron, South Dakota. And I had to sign for it. And so we went and we screened property for days. And that led to us also screening property in Guam and in Germany. And I remember one day Daryl Hayter called me up and said, gee, he says, some bad news. He says, we just, one of the freighters that was bringing a fire truck back for us from Germany just sunk in the North Sea. but we got a lot of federal surplus property, and Janklow loved that type of stuff, because it was not only good for state government to use, but everybody from school districts to local counties and cities could also use it and get it. And all they had to do, we just had to pay the freight, bringing it back into the country. But
somebody told me the story, I can't remember if it was Jim Hagan or who, about Bill flying a bunch of people to Tennessee because he bought this whole fleet of vans or something. I mean, it seemed like he was always doing stuff.
Oh yeah. I don't remember that incident.
I might have it wrong.
But he wanted us to try anything, from refurbishing cars, to buying. We'd buy cars off auctions from Hertz and Enterprise and the like, I remember once he says, "What's this deal of you having electric windows on these cars?" And FM, I says, "Governor," I says, "believe it or not, if you tell us that we have to have AM radios and crank up windows, they're more expensive than buying a package with a car." He says, "Is that right?" So I had to get some proof and show him, but because he didn't want it to appear that the state government was, spending money that was foolishly. But those are the types of, just fun things. And he loved it when we, one time a cabinet secretary had gone to his office and was complaining that they couldn't order a certain color of Systems furniture. And he calls me, "Geraets, what's the deal here?" I said, "No," I said, "Governor, I says, it's a Henry Ford principle. You can have any color as long as it's tan." Mm-hmm. And he said, I said, "Governor, otherwise we have a mishmash of furniture when we have to move and reconfigure offices." And he said, "Oh, that's a heck of an idea." "Yeah, good idea." Or state employees wanting to have their own business cards. Believe it or not, people used to they would design their own business cards, working for the state, So when I became Commissioner of Administration, you know, I'd send him these notes. He's, oh, hell of an idea, good idea. And he said, you could, no, everybody had to get their own, you had to get your business cards from the state, from purchasing and printing, you know. There's one guy came in and he says, well, what am I going to do with these gold embossed cards? I said, not my problem. You know, pay for them. You know, but in that time it was a couple $100. But just think of that. Everybody, it was just little things like that that he did in state government it was tremendous. I mean, it was just.
Paint colors in the offices was another.
Oh, yeah. Oof. A lot of people, yeah, they didn't like that because everybody, again, wanted their own colors in their office. And we adopted what I call a Golden Gate principle, okay? Like on the Golden Gate Bridge, they start at one end and paint, and takes them a long time. By the time they get to the other end, it's time to go back and start.
Right.
That's what we did. And we did little, it was just little things too, like, you know, don't put Scotch tape up on doors and on walls and stuff like that. It just, I remember in the Capitol itself, we had, I just thought of another deal. We had put new tile floors in. There was some cracks because the building had shifted, so we took the benches out and never put them back.
This was where?
In the Capitol building itself.
Well, like in the halls?
Mm-hmm. Because it was the employees and everybody would come in and they would picnic in there. And we had pop spilt and stuff on the walls, and it was just, you know, just to keep things clean. I mean, it was.
Did you ever deal with the round green bench that was in the middle of the rotunda?
Yes.
Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
There was a push 4 or 5 years ago to bring it back, which
we
did not do.
We removed it when we were redoing the floors, but that was in his second term that the building had shifted, the Capitol building, and an engineering company came in and adjusted and stabilized the Capitol. But we had all these cracks in the floors, the terrazzo tile, and we hired a company out of Sioux Falls to fix the cracks. And if you notice now, and you find some of those cracks, you'll see that there's a little, in many of them, there is a little heart-shaped terrazzo tile. Those guys did that. We didn't know they were doing it. And at first I was really upset. I was going to have them tear them out, you know, because that wasn't part of the contract, you know. But it was Janklow liked the idea. And he says, well, it's kind of like the guys that put in the turquoise tile when the building was built. It's unique. People look for them. They come into the Capitol. The kids love looking for the turquoise tile and the tiles now with the little hearts in them. But that's when we removed, and then we polished the floors and removed the benches, and that's when the center bench was moved. And we haven't had them in storage, ready to put back, but...
The state still has that center bench.
Yes.
Yeah.
They did when I left.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
I think the Historical Society, it's not on display, but I think the Historical Society has it.
Yeah. And if the Capital Beautification Commission, if they, you know, wanted it back, or whoever is the governor, they could probably get it back. But it was just the idea of what we were trying to do is with this simple things like, you know, furniture, you know, just to standardize, and, you know, because offices changed, and we used to have we had literally hundreds and hundreds of desks that were yellow, and red and blue, and Systems furniture that was purple, and I mean, it was just an absolute waste of money because you couldn't reuse it, you know. And so we standardized as much as we could, everything from colors to, you know, of course, with Christmas trees, I remember we had a fire in the Capitol, down in the basement, a coffee pot, but I think it was during Christmas, and I said, gee whiz, so I put out a little deal to the department head saying, guys, you can't have these Christmas trees, live Christmas trees, in your offices, because they had, you know, you go outside up here, or even in the office buildings, they'd have little Christmas trees. Everybody had their own Christmas trees. And I remember the Aberdeen American News called me the Scrooge of Pierre, Mr. Scrooge. But anyway.
Were you involved with the Capitol restoration?
Yes. We, it's kind of started in when Janklow was in his second term. We had, if the annex of the Capitol, the parking lot came right to the back door. And I remember one time, there was literally I looked out my window and there was a bus. And it was so close to the back door that he had to back up because people couldn't get out. And so we hired a company, and the Capital Beautification Commission approved the design for the kind of the horseshoe effect that we have now. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that was built in his second term. And that's kind of the time that he really got hooked on restoring the Capitol. And I can't remember, but I think it was in his third term, we were really into it with restoring the Senate and the House chambers. And as a side note, he calls me up. One time he says, come on up here. I've hired Tony Eaglehorse to do some touch-up painting. Well, Tony Eaglehorse was an inmate at the pen. And when Janklow was Attorney General, Tony had he detained some people from Connecticut up on the 4th floor in the Capitol.
Yeah, I've heard that story.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was Tony. And
so that's the guy he hired to do the painting.
Part of the touch-up, because Tony was just a remarkable artist. And he says, come in the back door. So I went in the side door, and he says, Tony's out here, and he wants to, and I'm going to show him what we're going to do. And because Tony was still, we had him housed out. He was like, was it a DCI or something? Because that was before the women's prison was built. I can't remember where we had Tony living while he was working there, because he was still an inmate. But he says, you just stay between me and Tony because it wasn't really amiable at first, I don't think. Because I think Janklow went up there with an M16 or something when.
Right.
Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But Tony wanted to get next to the governor, so I'm kind of dancing, all the way through. But those, again, back to the Governor Janklow, that's what we're talking about. He loved giving people a second chance, and Tony drew him a picture of a buffalo and I think a prairie dog. He did a pencil, and it was really, Janklow appreciated that. So when Tony was done, but with the Capitol restoration, that was a huge project. Hilger's Gulch was another one.
was gonna ask you about that.
Yeah, that was,
'Cause that was basically a dump, wasn't it?
it was just a, yeah, it wasn't a dump, but it was just a true rough area. And it turned into just a beautiful park. I was a bit disappointed that Governor Dugard
Yeah.
kind of tried to put it back up. I was part of a little committee in Pierre at the time trying to get him to not do that. But but anyway, Hillgrass Gulch was a huge project. But we used inmates on that, and that was another thing that he really was big on, was using inmates, because we had tuck pointing crews. Tuck pointing is between bricks, is the mortar that they have to chink out and then replace. And all of our state buildings were in dire need of tuck pointing. And he saw that. And it's terribly expensive when you have a commercial entity do it. But we had tuck pointing crews, inmates. We had roofing crews that were replacing roofs and replacing windows and all across the state buildings. And he did that. We did that with the sale leaseback funds that another brainchild of his, that we were able to put those millions of dollars back into those state buildings. You know, it was, I remember up at the state prison in Sioux Falls here, we replaced Warden Weber. Showed me, he says, look at this. He said, this is a water main made out of wood. I mean, anyway, we did all sorts of projects with that sale leaseback money, and that was another great deal that I'm really ambling here.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, I remember one time when he was trying to figure out a place for the women's prison, right next to the Oahe Dam, there was a pump house. And I think it was during the Carter administration where there was a project to take Missouri River water from the Oahe Dam right there at the pump house, or right at the dam, and then pump it all the way to Huron. And they had done some work outside of Pierre, but it never got funding for second or third term or year, and so it kind of died. So there's this huge pump house right next to, it's still there. And he says, do you think we could use this as a women's prison? So we went out and looked at it, and it's huge, but it was, yeah. But that's the kind, but there's just no dumb ideas, you know. It's just, he encouraged people to come up with ideas, to think about better ways of doing things, or think outside the box, you know. Some stuff like that never went anywhere. Etsy was another one, you know. It's a great idea, just didn't go anywhere. But other things, you know, like wiring the schools. Gee whiz. You know, it was huge and had a huge impact. But it's just, you know, it was a fun time. It was a fun time. It was the greatest job I ever had, you know.
What years were you commissioner?
His third and fourth term.
That whole
8
8
years.
years, and then you left right before
Christmas trees.
Christmas. So
September.
was Steve Stonebeck
Yes.
your deputy?
Yeah.
I remember I was
Good guy.
working for Rounds as he came in, and Steve was the acting commissioner,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think wanted to be appointed, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Steve's good guy, hard-working guy.
You also had some commissioner administration event. I mean, like the big World War II memorial,
Yes.
and that whole ceremony would have been under your
Yes,
jurisdiction.
we had. Gee whiz. I didn't think I'd ever. Who's the sculptor that did that?
Oh, it's Looting and shared treaty.
Yes,
Mhm.
they did the memorials down on the lake, and well, and that was set for, and then the governor invited all veterans from the state to come to that when we unveiled that on Saturday. Well, if you recall, Tuesday of that week was 9/11. And I don't know if I don't think I was in the room when he said this. He says, but I'll be damned if they're gonna, they're gonna stop us from doing this. And so we went ahead because there was some discussion about, nobody knew at the time what was happening, and there was a lot of fear around the country. And but he said, no, we're gonna, particularly these are veterans, and it went. I mean, people really appreciated it. It was a lot of people involved with that, and it Capitol Lake. It really, we converted the visitor center from an old garage to a visitor center where you could have meetings, and because it was just ugly down there, and part of the reason, excuse me for jumping all over, but part of the reason that we're able to do that as well is that in his second term again, we dredged Capitol Lake, okay? And all of that muck went up Hilger's Gulch and to the end of Hilger's Gulch where there are 2 soccer fields right now. And it was kind of dammed up, and then all that stuff was sitting there. And I remember before Steve Stonebeck, we had a guy, Dave Oscarson was his name. He was the head of the grounds crew at the time, and he went up there, and it had crusted over, and he fell through to his waist. And we thought, oh my gosh, this is, again, can you imagine some kids playing on this, falling through, drowning in that stuff, So what we did was, if you walk out of the back of the Capitol, at South Dakota, there's a South Dakota Boulevard, and now the Buildings and Grounds office or shop is located right next to it.
Yeah.
Well, to the west, that hill was pretty sharp at one time. One winter, we had an open winter, we hauled that entire hillside up Hilger's Gulch and covered all of that sludge and kind of packed it and converted it into, now it is the soccer field. And they have I think we signed a long-term lease so that the soccer association could use it, but only as long as the state didn't need it. There was an open end on that, because if the state needs the property, then they had to walk away. And then they provide the maintenance. They all the water for the grass and stuff. It was a heck of a deal for us. But anyway, another story of.
I think they just dredged Capitol Lake again.
Yes, they did.
Last year.
Yes, it looks nice.
Yeah,
But-
they made some of the edge around the lake, they've made some nice improvements.
Yeah,
in the last couple
they did a very nice job. Yeah, very nice job. The people I worked with, I would say that my biggest contact was probably Pam Roberts. Okay, she was great. I can't say enough good things about Pam.
I know her well.
Yeah, I would, she would, a couple comments, one time she said, because I'd meet with her daily and give her little scoops of, this, because sometimes it's the little things that come to bite a governor, to say, you got to be aware of this, and it's happening in You know, we'd have a state employee that would do something silly, you know. Well, which I suppose I could give you a couple examples of silly stuff that we had. The Cultural Heritage Center was new, and they kept saying they think somebody's stealing money out of this donation bin. It's a big pedestal as you walked in, and then, but it had a glass top on it, and so I called a friend of mine in DCI. I said, "Who? Can you give me the name of a private detective? Because I don't want anybody knowing about this." And so I called this guy, and he says, "Yeah," he said, I can put some cameras up there, and nobody." But I said, I don't want anybody to know what you're doing. I don't want security. I don't want anybody in BOA or in the Cultural Heritage Center. I said, it has to be innocuous. And he said, sure. So it hadn't been operational a week. And he says, Geraets, I got to show you something. He said, found out what's going on. And we had a security guard who would go up there on his rounds late at night, screwdriver, undo all the deals, then take out a few of the bills at a time and put it back. And so I called DCI. I called them in, showed them. They said, okay, well, they arrested the guy, and then they interviewed him. And oh my gosh, of course, DCI does, when they do their investigations, this guy confessed to a whole string of just stuff that we were missing, or offices that had reported stuff, missing. And so I would make sure that Pam always had the heads up on that, so the governor would have the heads up, because I was not in the inner circle. But it was, one other time, talking about state employees doing silly things. I was walking through the downstairs of the main first floor of the Capitol. That's when phone booths were still there, public pay phones were still there. And I thought, we should be getting some revenue from this. So I called the phone company, and they said, oh yeah, you are. I said, well, where is it going? Well, come to find out that it was going to a person in state government, and he was putting the money in a checking account. And so when the governor found out about that, he says, you go fire him. I says, Governor, I can't fire him. And I says, so I said, you have to sign a letter. So I went, gave it to the guy, and said, walked him out of the building. But it's, why people do something, it's just, but it was fun, like I said, fun time.
Any other people you worked with, or you remember particularly?
Oh, sure. Well, there was.
We kind of got off talking about Pam.
Yeah. Excuse me. But Marshall Damgart was always fun. He's an idea guy. He just, gee whiz, the department heads, Jim Ellenbecker, and what a class act, Jim. And all the Department of Corrections I worked with quite a bit because of the inmates, and and of course, and then with Human Services, Bill Podorowski was there at the time. I remember Bill, easy to work. John Jones, the DOT guys, everybody was. Of course, kind of a funny thing that just popped in my mind again is just that I remember BOA, Bureau of Administration, charged for everything. I mean, that's how, if you wanted to take a state car, after we had the fleet all up and running, if you wanted a Malibu, it was, I forget, 18 cents a mile or something. But everything was, but if you needed a Suburban, it was maybe 30 cents a mile, but we had it all factored out. If you had office space, you had to pay for your office space because that was refundable through the federal network. But it's also a way of enforcing state agencies to keep within their budgets, because you can't just, everybody wants a huge copier. Well, no, what can you afford and what do you need? But we would provide that. But so we charged for everything. And one time, I think I went into a cabinet meeting and I was going to sit down, and they said, no, you can't sit here. We don't want you to sit. And I said, what's the problem? They said, well, you're probably going to charge us to sit next to you. But the Bureau of Administration had that's how we funded. It was an internal funding mechanism that you're well aware of. But
Yes.
I can't think of anything else.
What would you say are some of your biggest achievements or the things you're most proud of from your time in state government?
Oh, probably the fleet. We also consolidated gas leases. God, that was, I don't know what happened to it after we left, but we hired a guy who because some of your campuses had individual natural gas and gas contracts, and we consolidated those, and he handled those working with those entities. Gee whiz, the capital restoration, again, the fleet, I didn't,
You'd have been proud of me. There was a department one time who came in wanting to split themselves off from the fleet.
excuse me?
From the fleet. They wanted to have.
Oh,
their own,
sure.
and
Oh,
I,
yeah.
And I put the kibosh on that. Like, no, we're not backing off and having
Yeah.
one fleet.
The only entity that I think was able, there were Highway Patrol,
Yeah.
because those guys go through, we couldn't charge them enough to pay for a vehicle because they would go through vehicles and when they go through a ditch, the bumper would come off on some of those old. So they split off, and DOT heavy trucks, because we just couldn't amortize it enough to make it work.
Right.
But yeah, you have all these unique.
Well, they consolidated into BIT, all the IT functions into BIT during that, because that was under BOA at one time. It wasn't a separate bureau.
That was a real troubled deal there. When Mark Lester had left, and Governor Janklow hired Dick McCrossin, who used to be president of Citibank here in Sioux Falls, to come in and do some consolidation of BIT. Okay, and so Dick McCrossin and I flew across the state, and because McCrossin claimed that he could save $3 million, and it was consolidating mainframes. The university had a mainframe, and I think Aberdeen Labor had their own. And this was at a time when T1 lines were extremely expensive as well. But anyway, Dick McCrossin was big in that with that contract, and but Dick was a New Yorker, and he and I did not hit it off. And I remember we had some of the BIT, and I was kind of in charge of BIT for a while during that time, because they were also looking for because I remember telling my wife I'm ahead of bit. She said, "You don't even know how to run a computer." And I told Janklow that. He said, "You don't have to. He said, you got people that can do that. I just need you there for the while we're in this transition." But then Dick McCrossin came in and he had this plan, kind of 5-stage plan. And at one meeting in the governor's conference room, he just laid into these folks because they didn't have this one part of the plan done. And I didn't comment. He says, okay, because he was going to fire them all. That's how he operated. And everybody left, and I says, Dick, I says, you did not ask these people for that report. And I said, that's very unfair, what you just said, and you owe them an apology. And he came over and he thumped me in the chest, and he says, I can be your best friend or I can be your worst flanking enemy. And I was just ready to push him back, and Jim Sawyer walks in. He says, we're having ice cream over in the governor's office for his birthday. You guys want to come over? And it was just like, whoa, talk about a ice, you know. But we went over, and then I stayed, and I told the governor, I said, if I have to, I'll resign, but I will not work with Dick McCrossin anymore. And so I walked out, and Dick was in the outside office there, and we exchanged stares, and I left. And about a week later, when McCrossin had his project all done, he came down to my office, and he says, I want you to look at this, make sure we got these parts. And I said, well, you got the 4 parts, but what about the landline consolidation? He said, well, that wasn't part of it. I said, yes, it was. He says, no, it was. I says, you just come into my office and ask me for my comments and my input, and I'm telling you what they are, and then if you can take them or leave it. And I says, it was in there when we talked about it. Well, that night he had a presentation to the Appropriations Committee, and all 5 parts were in there. But that was not one of my better moments there with Mr. McCrossin. So I'm sure he had, you know, there's always 2 sides of the deal. But as far as accomplishments go, it was, you know, it was just fun to be part of it because there was just so much stuff happening, you know. And why can't I think of it now? Because it was just.
Well, we talked about a lot of it.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, just particularly the last, you know, in his third and fourth term, because when his second term I was just a division head, so not too much involved. But you know, the last years it was ever you get a call, you know. I remember one morning I had a phone, a designated phone in the house.
I think all the cabinet did, didn't they?
Yeah, at the time. That was before cell phones.
Yeah.
And gee whiz, you get those calls, and because he worked all the time, and you just say, you'd ring, you pick it up. He says, at what limit do you have to go out on a bid on a small construction project? You know, and he just wanted to know. And so you'd say, at the time it was $27,000. Are you sure? Governor? Okay, click. That was it.
Yeah, one of his, I can't remember if it was Pam or Deneen Hollingsworth or who it was, who told me that they didn't think they could have survived if there had been cell phones at the time that Janklow was the governor. Because there would have been no escaping it.
Yeah, and even, you know, because I had to have a portable computer. Well, the portable computers at the time was the size of the old portable sewing machines. You know, they're about this big, about this high, with a handle on top. They looked like a sewing machine. Yeah, you had to have one of those at your house. And of course, emails were just, we were just kind of starting to really get rolling on this stuff. And
Janklow never really did email, did he?
Yeah,
Did he?
yeah,
I've never really heard that about
yeah.
him.
Because I'd get them. Yeah, he just, you know, he'd say, have this report done by such and such. Yeah. But you're right. Yeah, I have cell phones. Have you talked to Pam and Duneen and the
Well,
group?
a lot of these people I've worked with.
Yes.
I mean, Pam, Deneen Hollingsworth, Hagen,
Mm-hmm. Good guy, good folks.
Deb Bowman, Sawyer,
Mm-hmm.
are all people who I worked with in the DeGard administration too. So
Mm-hmm.
I've heard a lot of Janklow stories.
Yeah, but it was a good time. Good time. I appreciated it. You know. So.
Well, I think we've been about an hour. That's what you
Yeah,
wanted to do. Anything
yeah,
else you want to cover?
Let me see if I had anything. Excuse my.
No, you're good, you're good.
Got the Christmas trees.
Pam told me to ask you about the Christmas
Oh
tree.
yeah, well, I wouldn't. When we lived in Pierre, and our son and his children would come out, I said, "Well, if you come out for Thanksgiving, we'll go to them because they're still fresh. But if you come out at Christmas, I don't want you in the Capitol." When you were there, didn't it bother you to have those?
Well, I worked with a couple people. I think Jim Sawyer was one of them who were allergic to Christmas trees. So here you are working in the Capitol.
Yeah.
It was always just a miserable month for Sawyer and one of the
'Cause
receptionists or something. There were a couple of them.
Because they were full of this, they had,
Yeah.
yeah, but, well, I hope that helps.
That was great.
Great house.
Yeah, thank you for doing it.
Great story.
Yeah.
Okay.